Welcome back to Philosophy in 60 Seconds-ish. What is traditional natural law? Traditional natural law is a theistic normative ethical theory with roots in Aristotelian and Neoplatonic thought. Its most important advocate was St. Thomas Aquinas, who tells us, quote, "The natural law is nothing else than the rational creature's participation of the eternal law." If that's right, then to understand the natural law, we must first understand something about the eternal law. So what is that? Again, St. Thomas tells us, quote, "Law is nothing else but a dictate of practical reason emanating from the ruler who governs a perfect community. Now it is evident, granted that the world is ruled by divine providence, that the whole community of the universe is governed by divine reason. Therefore, the very notion of the government of things in God, the ruler of the universe, has the nature of a law. And since the divine reason's conception of things is not subject to time, but is eternal, there it is that this kind of law must be called eternal. Natural law, then, by extension, is just the temporal effect of the eternal law as showing itself in creatures. It is called natural because it is grounded in nature, which is to say, manifesting itself through the essences of things and their inherent inclinations. Thus, what is ultimately good for something is determined by what that something by its nature is directed toward. In other words, goodness and badness are analyzed by how fully or inadequately a particular being actualizes its specifying potentiality. That is, whether it actualizes the potentials which, given its nature, it must actualize to be a flourishing instance of its kind. To borrow an example from Edward Feser, quote, "A tree's nature aims or directs it towards sinking roots into the ground, growing bark and leaves, carrying out photosynthesis, and so on. To the extent that a tree realizes these ends, it is a good tree, in the sense of a good specimen of the kind tree. To the extent that it fails to realize them, due, say, to termite damage or disease, it is a bad tree in the sense of a defective specimen." The analysis of moral goodness or badness, as opposed to just natural goodness or badness, is fundamentally no different. It just pertains to instances where rationality is online. Morality, after all, is a rational enterprise, insofar as a rational creature has not only the ability to know what is good or bad, but the ability to contingently determine themselves to either follow the dictates of the natural law or not. Thus, to the extent that a rational creature performs actions that result in the acquiring of virtue, which is understood as the perfection of a human power which causes us to flourish, rather than vice, those actions are considered morally good because they ultimately amount to that creature becoming a more excellent instance of its kind. As Edward Feser summarizes the matter, quote, "An action is morally good when it is consistent with the realization of the ends toward which our nature directs us, and morally bad when it frustrates the realization of these ends. Moreover, our intellects have as their natural end knowledge of the truth about things, including the truth about what is good or bad for us given our natures. The will, meanwhile, has as its natural end the pursuit of what the intellect takes to be good. Hence, a properly functioning intellect and will, and thus an agent who is thinking and acting rationally, will grasp what is in fact good for us and seek to pursue it. For example, an agent will see that ignorance and gluttony are bad for us, and thus will choose to avoid these things and to cultivate the virtues that will facilitate doing so. That doing so is morally good for us is a matter of natural law, is something like the way that sinking roots into the ground and taking in water through them is good for a tree as a matter of physical law.